Joining me on the show to debate this is a man acknowledged as an encyclopedia of sport, Novi Kapadia. Also joined from New Zealand by former cricketer Chris Harris, an old friend of ours, and also Gaurav Kalra, who works for ESPN Cricinfo, but he loves his sport as well. Gaurav, let me start by asking you that it's very difficult to compare across generations, but when you're trying to zero in on perhaps the greatest sports person of all time, the first question I want to ask you, in your opinion, does Roger Federer make it to that list?
Yes, I know we are in the moment right now, Digvijay, and perhaps when you are in the moment and watching an athlete do the things that Federer is doing this year, you can get a bit swayed by it. However, I think he makes a very strong case to be the greatest sports person of all time. And I say that very carefully because you have to look at not just what the player is achieving, but his sport as well. You've got to look at longevity. Of course, you've got to do it over a number of years, as he has. He's come back from injury, etc. But also the canvas of the sport. Tennis is a sport that's played around the world. He comes into the world game at a time when there are several superstars, and then he actually plays in an era where there are so many accomplished players, guys like Rafael Nadal and Novak Djokovic, and he continues to do well in that era and rack up record after record. So I think the longevity, the canvas of the sport, and I'm hoping that we'll discuss this in detail as we go further, make Roger Federer a very compelling candidate for that nomenclature.
A very compelling candidate, Novi Kapadia, says Gaurav Kalra. But for Federer to be regarded as one of the greats of sport, across sport, he needs to get out of that list and the comparison with, say, a Serena Williams, Margaret Court, 64 titles, Grand Slam titles, Martina Navratilova herself, 59 titles, also the oldest to win a slam at 50.
Yes, I mean, the feminists will hate me for that, but I think the women's tennis is still played over 3 sets. So I think over that, it's undisputed now. I'll just quote Jimmy Connors, I mean, legend, who says in this era of specialization, you're a grass court specialist, a hard court specialist, or a clay court specialist, or you're Roger Federer. Roger Federer has a bit of everything. You know, he doesn't have a booming serve, but he has a clinical serve. He can be exquisite at the net, drop shots, he can serve and volley, he can play at the baseline. He's got all the shots plus elegance, and what Gaurav was saying, longevity, and somehow, you know, manages to keep getting what Thomas Burdick said. I mean, he never seems to age. That is really what makes him unique. No, I think without doubt, he's the greatest tennis player of all time.
I hope Serena Williams isn't watching, but Chris Harris, let me bring you in on this debate. You know, as Novi said, no female players also in our list. But is it fair, Chris Harris, to judge sports persons only on the basis of the number of titles they have won?
No, I think there's more to it, and I think that's what makes it so special for Roger Federer. It's his longevity. I mean, winning his 19th at 35. It was pretty special moments watching his family and his 2 sets of twins there. Obviously an emotional time for him. And it's also the way he's gone about it. You know, he's much loved. I've heard a couple of stories where he was hitting at his local club and he was watching a young boy practicing over in another court, and he went over and had some hits with him. And that's typical of Roger Federer. So it's not only the amount of titles that he's won, it's the way he's gone about it. He's the ultimate professional, a great sportsman and a great man. So look, to say he's the best sportsman of all time is a very, very big call. I certainly think he's in the list, but you know, when you talk about some of the names that you've already mentioned, I would hate to try and say who's number one.
I'm going to put you on the spot because that's what the entire debate is about. But Novi Kapadia, just before we get into the details, it's also about looking at the sheer impact you had and also the sport you played. I was talking to Manavjit Sandhu, Khel Ratna awardee, and he said that, you know, even though you have the likes of Michael Schumacher or someone like a Michael Phelps, who's the greatest Olympian of all time with 28 medals, 23 of them gold, those are niche sports. You have to look at the impact.
Yeah, I fully agree with Manavjit Sandhu. Those are niche sports. They haven't crossed the class divide. It's still a very white man supremacy sport. I mean, motor racing, you have to be really amongst the ultra rich to do it. So in that way, Muhammad Ali, you know, the impact they had, I mean, made boxing a worldwide sport. And Federer, the elegance that he brings into it. And also the fact that they've been great human beings. I mean, many people don't know the charity that Federer does. You know, he's helped tsunami victims, cancer victims. He has a whole Federer Foundation.
He's a good man.
He's a great player and I think a great man also. And a family man. So many values that he brings in. You know, that is also what makes him.
You know, Gaurav Kalra was talking about the moment. We all seem to be swayed by the moment. I don't think Gaurav was referring to the binge drinking of Roger Federer. But Chris Harris, since you are with us here, you know, there's a compelling case for Sir Donald Bradman. Because when you look at perfection in sport, that man perhaps has come closest to achieving perfection in sport. An average of 99.94 in Test cricket.
Yes, without trying to force too much debate tonight, I went through all the names that were bounded about. Muhammad Ali is certainly up there. Look, for me, if you look at all these other great sportsmen from all their different eras, the likes of Michael Jordan, who was obviously spectacular at his time. But if you look at the current crop, there'd be a few people that say the likes of Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, you know, Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook. Those guys now are very similar to what Michael Jordan. I think he really stood out in his time, and, you know, with his exploits with Nike as well, that helped him get exposure. But with all these other great athletes, and then you talk about the Wizard, you know, winning Olympic golds in 1928, 32 and 36, over 400 international goals. There's so many great stories about him. Like, I think it was in... I think he was in Holland, in Germany, and they had to crack open a stick because they thought he had a magnet in it. So he was one guy that obviously stood out above the rest. But for me, with Sir Donald Bradman, as I said, if you look at all these other players, although they've been absolutely exceptional and at the top of their sport, there's other players that actually aren't that too far away. But if you look at Sir Donald Bradman's, you know, his average, his career, I mean, he averaged, as you said, 99.94 in Test cricket in uncovered wickets, so it was even more difficult. And if you look at the best players of any generation, and even the modern one, the best, absolute best players are averaging mid-50s, so they're almost only half as good as what Sir Donald Bradman did. So for me, he's got to be very, very close to the top of the list, purely because statistically there's no one even close to him. And in all these other people that you've mentioned, although they are on the top of their sport, there are other players that are very close or very close to them.
Yeah, Gaurav Kalra, I saw you raising your hand. When you talk of statistics, statistics can show you a lot of things. It can show you that Margaret Court has won 64 Grand Slam titles as well. But when you look at someone of the likes of, say, Don Bradman or Dhyan Chand, Michael Jordan, Muhammad Ali and Michael Schumacher, they are the shining beacons of their sport. Even today, when you talk of their sport, these are the names which come to your mind.
Yes, but I think when you're having a look at who is the greatest sports person of all time, I think you've got to qualify it by looking at their sport as well. I mean, if you look at Sir Don Bradman's sport, he was by far and away the greatest batsman of all time. He is, because his average is 30, 35, even 40 points ahead of the other good players or the other great players who played the game. However, he played Test cricket in only 2 countries, in Australia and in England. This is not to take away from his achievements, but when you look at overall the picture of sport, look at what Roger Federer has done. He's won over his professional career against players from virtually every country on the planet. He's won, as Novi referred to earlier, on virtually every surface. Remember, tennis is unique. It demands a different skill set on every surface. And he's done that. He would have had a lot more success on clay had he not come across the greatest clay court player to have ever played, unfortunately, in his generation itself. So I think that from that point of view, Federer makes a very strong case. And I think the only one who really hold a candle up to him, as far as I am concerned, are Usain Bolt and Michael Phelps, because of their longevity and because they've done it at the Olympic stage. There is no bigger stage in world sport.
I will get to Usain Bolt and Michael Phelps as well, Novi, because no discussion is complete without them. But there's one name which I also wanted to bring up. You know, there was a time when, especially when I was in my formative years as a journalist, we all thought that the record of Jack Nicklaus is under threat. But we've seen Tiger Woods come close and then fade away. And that record of 18 majors in golf, again a global sport, some can say a niche sport, but at that point of time it was very competitive. Even now it's extremely competitive, and every year you have 3 or 4 new major winners. So we can't ignore Jack Nicklaus's record as well.
Yes, in even Tiger Woods, because I think Tiger Woods also helped to break the class divide, bringing blacks into
Is that
golf.
important for you, breaking the class divide, as Ali did, not just as a sports person, but also his opposition to the Vietnam War?
The social tension that you go through in your formative years, when it's not easy. Full credit to Serena and Venus Williams also for that. So I think for that, Tiger Woods, I do give him a lot of credit. No, Jack Nicklaus is also unique. I think all the ones we've named are unique in their own way. Bradman, to give him his due, I believe that he used to go to work at 8 o'clock in the morning and then go and play a test match. You can't imagine Yuvraj Singh and Virat Kohli doing that at present. So, they are all unique. But yes, Federer, 2003, Facebook and Twitter didn't exist. It seems a generation ago. Atal Bihari Vajpayee was our Prime Minister. That to win it then and still be so convincing in an era in which I think is the greatest era ever of tennis. You have 4 outstanding champions. Andy Murray would have won 8 or 9 Grand Slams if he'd played in any other era.
Yes.
And on all surfaces, as Gaurav said, Federer has been convincing. He's helped his country win a Davis Cup. So there's that great sense of loyalty also which he's had, which many of the others don't have.
Yes, a lot of Federer fans here, but let me get back to Chris Harris. Chris, New Zealand, where you're from, and it's pretty late at night there, you have a history of sport. How do you look at the Olympians? The Olympics is a stage where New Zealanders do very well. Your rowing team is excellent. You had a magnificent shot put champion in Mallory Adams as well. And then you look at someone like a Michael Phelps, who's won 28 medals. When you add all the gold medals and all the medals India as a country have won at the Olympics, it doesn't even come close.
Yeah, no, it's scary, isn't it? For us, the Olympics is the absolute pinnacle in those sports. I guess the Olympics and the World Championships. And if you look at what Michael Phelps did, 23 gold medals, that's absolutely incredible. And he won 8. And I think my lasting memory before that was, I think Mark Spitz won 7.
Yes, Munich.
You can't deny those statistics. 23 gold medals. There's no arguing it, really. So once again, I would hate to put someone at the very top of this list, but you'd have to say that Michael Phelps is definitely in that list of, I guess for me, it's like a top 10 list. And all those names that we've mentioned today are in it. And I would just hate to put someone at the top because these are people that have stood out in their sports and they're all, obviously, from my point of view, great.
Yeah, and an interesting anecdote is that in 2008, I covered my first Olympics, and that's where I first saw Usain Bolt smash the world record, became Olympic champion. At the Rio Games, this man, Gaurav Kalra, was standing next to me and going ballistic in his seat, jumping up and down, going Usain, Usain. I have that video still on my iPad, Gaurav, but for you, Usain Bolt comes very close simply because of the fact that barring one doping issue which didn't affect him, but affected one medal which he won, he's never lost an Olympic final. And that is the blue ribbon event of the Olympics, the 100, 200 and the 4x100 relay. Novi Kapadia was with me in London when that happened.
Yes, and Vijay, these are the kinds of things where everything happens in 10 seconds. So you would imagine that consistency is that much harder to accomplish in a sport such as this kind. You're sprinting, you have one, we've seen it so many times in the history of athletics. You have one stumble, you have one poor start, you can be out of the race altogether. These are the sorts of things, the margins are so thin. And he came into Rio with his place under question. He hadn't done very well in the lead up to Rio. He'd not had a lot of, his form wasn't supposed to be good. Yet on the big stage, he did the three-peat. Yes, we have the one medal that has been taken away for another violation. But I think this has been done in a sport such as sprinting, which is obviously requires young, fresh body, able to continue to remain quick and fast over a period of time, to do it repeatedly at 3 Olympics and also in the interspersing World Championships in the way that he's done. A big stage performer in sport, I think, is someone you've got to look at very, very carefully. I think he pushes Federer and he pushes Phelps, or perhaps is at the same level as Phelps. But I still think, in my mind, Roger Federer remains number one. I'm just not convinced about arguments for someone like a Michael Schumacher or a Michael Jordan. Schumacher drove a car which was as important as the driver himself, and Michael Jordan played in a domestic league, really.
Yes.
Yes, it's a great The things that he achieved in that league were exceptional, but I don't think he's an all-time great world sportsman in the truest sense of the word.
Okay, interesting point Gaurav makes. And Novi, let's come to someone who played a global game. And this is someone very close to your heart. No, Maradona may say, no, I am the greatest. But FIFA judged Pele as the greatest footballer, won 3 World Cups. Perhaps that's the reason why you don't put Maradona just above him in terms of sheer talent, maybe Maradona. But Pele is another story, and I'll come to Muhammad Ali as well. But Pele is someone who could be regarded as the greatest because across a 12-year period, he was arguably the best footballer on the planet. You have close contenders now in Messi and Ronaldo, but they haven't won a World Cup.
Yes, no, and full credit to Pele, the longevity and what many people don't know, the tackling was brutal then. The yellow-red cards came in the 1970 World Cup, which was his last World Cup.
He was kicked out of 62?
He was kicked out of 66 and 62 also. Yes. He couldn't play the final. So to survive all that, and when you didn't get millions of dollars, and he remained, loyal to his club as well as, as well as to Brazil. Yes, Pele amongst the all-time greats because he transformed. There was always that argument that it's something like West Indies in cricket, that they are colourful and exuberant, but they don't really have the gumption, the professionalism to win a World Cup. Pele transformed all that. He made football into an art.
And I think also what Pele did was in a team sport, he was really the most outstanding person. Chris Harris, another name we have to discuss, and even though while I'm talking to you, I'm thinking of other names who could be in that list. I would perhaps think of Lin Dan for the way he's dominated badminton over all these years. But we have to also perhaps doff our hats at what the great Muhammad Ali did. Not just in the sport of boxing, you could say that his career, in a sense similar to Federer, had an amazing rise. There was a fall, then he came back again.
Yeah, Muhammad Ali was absolutely sensational, wasn't he? And, I mean, there were so many fights where he himself knew that perhaps he wasn't the best boxer in the ring at the time, but he just managed to come up with a plan to get the job done. And, I mean, that's what made him so incredible for me. He was a man before his time, really, and what he did on the world stage, there won't be too many people that won't have heard of the name of Muhammad Ali. So for me, he's definitely in that list and probably very near the top.
Yes, Gaurav, this is also about everyone knowing your name. Everyone knows the name of Ali or someone like a Federer. But what about Serena Williams? She played in the same generation. She plays in the same generation as Federer, has won more Grand Slams, has won 4 Olympic gold medals, and has had, again, ups and downs. There was a period in which her ranking had completely slipped to around 140 in the world.
Yes, makes a very strong case, Digvijay. Though, again, I think that while you can argue with on the Serena case because the canvas is wide and it is women's tennis, which is played all over the world, she makes a very strong case, yes. But I don't think she's had quite the same challenge as Roger Federer has had. I mean, just look at this generation of tennis players. How often before in the game have you had 3 players with over 10 Grand Slam titles and at the same time playing at the same time? I think Serena was challenged in the earlier extent to a little bit by her sister Venus, but then after that she's pretty much been the prime tennis player of her generation, and there's been number 5, 6 and 7 after that. She's had the top 5 places. So perhaps if you want to argue someone's case for not quite shaking Roger Federer off that pedestal, that would be the one way you would take Serena Williams off that. But, she's still got time. She could come back from delivering a child and win 7 more Grand Slam titles, and then we wouldn't be having this debate.
Okay, so I think we're going out of time. So let me start by putting all 3 of you on the mat. You all started off by saying you're all Federer fans, but for you, Novi Kapadia, looking at this list of who we've discussed, and perhaps some we haven't discussed, who for you has been across time, across generations, the greatest sports person of all time? Very quickly.
I think joint Federer and Muhammad Ali.
Federer and Muhammad Ali for Novi Kapadia. Okay, Chris Harris, your choice?
I'm going to go joint with Sir Donald Bradman and Muhammad Ali.
Okay, joint with Muhammad Ali and the Don. He comes from not very far away from Australia, but Gaurav Kalra, we seem to have Muhammad Ali in 2 of our panelists. Where would you go?
Roger Federer, no question in my mind.
Roger Federer, no question in Gaurav's mind. Well, this debate will go on and on. I think what consensus we can come to is that for all four of us, Federer is someone who has been a favorite, and for so many years he's entertained us like the greats who have entertained us over the years. Sadly, we can't come to perhaps a definite conclusion on who is the greatest sports person of all time, but I can tell you, I sure had a blast trying to find out who has been the greatest sports person of all time. Thank you, Novi Kapadia. Thank you, Gaurav Kalra. And thank you, Chris Harris as well. That's it then from us. Goodbye. Thanks for watching.